$185,000. That is the median retirement savings for Americans approaching 60 in 2026. Not the number your financial advisor quotes, not the number on the Fidelity commercials, the actual number. And it is already scarier than you think because a quarter of Americans in that same age range have zero. The median assumes you have something. And even if you do, the 4% rule on $185,000 generates $617 a month, which is roughly what a New York studio apartment costs in electricity and regret. There is a story nobody runs with the retirement savings data, and it is not about the number being small. It is about the number being the wrong number entirely. The average, what you probably heard, is $537,560, according to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances. The median is $185,000. Those two numbers describe the same group of people. One of them is real, and I'm going to show you exactly what happens when you build your entire life plan around the fake one. Here's what this video is about. I'm going to show you the actual retirement savings picture for Americans at 60 in 2026. Why the number you are probably thinking of is mathematically accurate and completely useless at the same time, and 3 specific mechanics underneath these numbers that are quietly destroying plans that look fine on paper. And before we are done, I am going to introduce you to a mechanism in the data that most retirement calculators simply do not account for, and when they miss it, the plan falls apart at exactly the wrong moment. The central metaphor I want you to hold on to throughout this entire video is simple. Bill Gates walks into a bar. The moment he sits down, the average net worth of everyone in that bar becomes somewhere north of $10 billion. The bartender is now, on average, a billionaire. That is what American retirement savings data looks like every time the word average appears. The average gets hijacked by the people at the front of the distribution, and the rest of the bar, most of the bar, gets completely obscured. Every time I show you a headline number in this video, I want you to ask, did Bill Gates just walk in? Now here is where it starts to get interesting. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you something that standard retirement advice actively does not want you to think about: a 3-year gap that can cost a retiring 60-year-old upward of $60,000 in a category most retirement plans do not budget a single dollar for. But first, let me show you what the data actually says at the starting line. There are 2 piles when you look at retirement savings in America. Pile 1, the numbers the industry shows you. Pile 2, the numbers that describe you. The industry shows you the mean because the mean is large and large numbers feel safe, and safe feeling numbers generate management fees. The mean for Americans aged 55 to 64 is $537,560. That is the Federal Reserve's own number. But the Federal Reserve also publishes the median, $185,000. The space between those two figures, $352,000, is what a small number of extremely high balance households add to the number every single person uses to benchmark themselves. That is Bill Gates in the bar. And it gets narrower the closer you look. Fidelity says that by age 60, you should have 8 times your annual salary saved. The median household income in this country for people approaching 60 is roughly $75,000. 8 times that is $600,000. The median American at the doorstep of retirement has $185,000. The gap between what Fidelity's benchmark says you should have and what the typical person actually has is $415,000. That is not a rounding error. That is a different life. But stay with me, because this is where it gets interesting in a way that the gap statistic alone does not capture. Only 9.2% of households in the 55 to 64 age range have over $1 million in retirement assets, according to the Congressional Research Service's analysis of that same Federal Reserve data. So when you read a headline saying the average American in their 60s has over 1.2 million saved, as Empower's platform data showed earlier this year, you are looking at a population of financially engaged, tech-savvy people who opted into a financial dashboard app. They are not the bar. They are the guy at the bar who already ordered the good scotch that Bill Gates walked in a long time ago. Here is a comedic cutaway. The data practically writes itself. The average American in their 60s has over 1.2 million in retirement savings. Says literally every financial platform whose users are people already tracking their retirement savings. Everyone else? Great. What is the average for the rest of us? Now, 29% of current retirees have no money saved for retirement at all, according to a 2026 survey by Clever Real Estate. Nothing. 18% started saving after age 50. A majority, 57%, did not start saving seriously until their 30s or later. And here is a number that does not get nearly enough attention. Over half of American households, 54%, report having no dedicated retirement savings at all, according to the Federal Reserve's own survey data. More than half. So when you are computing the average retirement savings in America, you are averaging in an enormous number of zeros. Those zeros are pulling the median down. The Jeffs at the top are pulling the mean up. And somewhere in the middle is the number that actually describes the experience of most 60-year-olds standing in front of a retirement timeline trying to make the math work. By the way, hit subscribe if you like the content. Otherwise, YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. Retirees themselves know something is off. Current American retirees say that people who want to retire comfortably in 2026 need an average of $823,800 in savings. They also report that they themselves currently have an average of just $288,700 saved. That is a self-assessed gap of $535,000, in their own words, from people who already retired. 92% of retirees say people underestimate how much retirement costs. That is not a fringe opinion. That is a consensus among people who live through the number being wrong. Now, let me introduce a thread I want to run through the rest of this video, because it changes the math in a way that is almost never discussed up front. His name is Marcus. He is 58. He works in mid-level corporate management at a logistics company that has been in his city for 40 years. He has $310,000 saved above the median by a significant margin. He has been telling himself since his early 50s that he will retire at 65. The plan made sense at 50, at 55, right up until the moment it stopped making sense, which is a moment that arrives for most people completely unannounced. Here's the thing the retirement savings number does not capture. Most people do not get to decide when they stop working. 58% of Americans retire earlier than they planned, according to research from the Trans-America Center for Retirement Studies. The median age at which they actually stop working is 62, not 65, not 67, 62. 3 years earlier than most plans account for. And when the 2026 EBRI survey asked those early retirees why they left, 41% cited a health problem or disability, up from 31% just the year before. 35% cited corporate changes, downsizing, reorganization, buyouts. Circumstances entirely outside the individual's control were responsible for 76% of all unplanned early retirements, the survey found. You think the problem is that people did not save enough, but actually, the problem is that the savings clock stops ticking before the plan says it should. Marcus does not have a savings problem at 58. He has a timeline problem. And in June of 2024, his company announced a restructuring. 200 positions eliminated. His was one of them. Now, Marcus is 59. He has $310,000 in savings. He cannot find a comparable job. AARP's surveys show that older workers perceive age discrimination as the #1 barrier to finding new work. A third of respondents said. So in 2025 data, the second most cited reason was health issues. So Marcus is not just unemployed. He is in a labor market that does not particularly want him. And here is the kicker hiding inside this particular calendar. Marcus needs to get to 65 to access Medicare. He is 59, that is 6 years of health insurance he has to buy at full price on the open market. And full price is not a metaphor. At age 60, a full price silver benchmark plan on the ACA marketplace costs approximately $1,598 per month, according to Value Penguin's 2026 data. By age 62, that rises to $1,691 per month. By 64, the last year before Medicare, it hits $1,766 per month. For the 3 years between 62 and 65 alone, the math on health insurance is $62,340, just in premiums, before deductibles, before copays, before the $1,736 hospital deductible that resets every time you are admitted, not once per year. This is what I call the invisible bill. And a 2026 report from the Employee Benefit Research Institute found that couples may need up to $469,000 saved just for healthcare costs in retirement. To have a 90% chance of covering their medical spending, a man needs $212,000. A woman needs $252,000. Those numbers are not the total retirement number. They are just the healthcare portion of the retirement number. For the person with the median $185,000 in total savings, that math does not work, not even close. Here is where knowing the number matters. And here is where I built a tool to close the gap between knowing it and acting on it. The numbers I have been walking you through are the foundation of something I put together called the Exit Code. It is a digital book, 8 chapters of actual retirement research, 50 years of data, no filler. I built it because the information exists. It is in the Federal Reserve survey data, in EBRI studies, in the SSA's own actuarial tables. But nobody synthesizes it into a mathematical framework that tells you, here is your specific date, here is the gap, here is how to close it. 2 things in the Exit Code are directly relevant to what we have been discussing. The 58% rule, which is exactly what the Transamerica data describes, but translate it into a concrete buffer strategy for people who might be forced out before they plan, and the chapter on the insurance gap. I modeled what that 62 to 65 window actually costs at different income levels, different states, different subsidy eligibility thresholds. The number for most people is not $60,000. When you add out-of-pocket costs and the compounding opportunity cost of spending down savings 3 years early, it is $14,000 a year in what I call the invisible bill. Most retirement calculators give this 0 weight. The Exit Code gives it its own chapter. You can get it through the link in the description for less than 1 hour with a mediocre financial advisor. The urgency is mathematical, not marketing. Every year you delay building the framework is another year compounding against you. Now, back to what the framework is built on, because the Social Security piece is where the math gets genuinely brutal for people who are not aware of how the levers work. The average Social Security retirement benefit in April of 2026, according to the Social Security Administration, is $2,081 per month. That is $24,972 per year. Financial planners and the SSA itself say the program was designed to replace about 40% of pre-retirement income. Most retirees spend between $50,000 and $60,000 per year, which means Social Security covers less than half the bill for the typical household, even when everything goes according to plan. Here is the timing problem embedded in that number. You can claim Social Security as early as 62. Most people who retire early involuntarily, at the median 62, do claim early because they need the money. Claiming at 62 locks in a permanent 30% reduction compared to your full retirement age benefit. Wait until 70 and you get an additional 8% per year from full retirement age, which for people born after 1960 is 67. That is 3 more years of compounding, 24% more for life. The swing between claiming at 62 versus waiting until 70 can be $12,000 to $15,000 per year. For every year you live, a person who lives to 85 and waited is looking at potentially $200,000 or more in additional lifetime income compared to the person who claimed at 62 because they had no other option. Most people who retire involuntarily at 62 are claiming Social Security at 62. They are not making a rational, long-term calculation about lifetime maximization. They are solving an immediate income problem with a permanent cut. And here is what happens to the already concerning Social Security number on top of this. The Social Security Trust Fund for Retirement and Survivor Benefits is projected to run short in the 4th quarter of 2032 According to the SSA's own chief actuary, a timeline that was actually accelerated in 2025 by a new federal policy change. If the trust fund depletes and nothing is done, benefits could be cut by 23 to 24% for everyone collecting. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget estimates that could amount to roughly an $18,100 annual loss for a dual-income couple retiring at the start of 2033. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is in the official annual trustees report. The people relying most heavily on Social Security are, by definition, the people with the least cushion to absorb a 24% reduction. Now think about what you are dealing with if you are Marcus. Forced out at 59, spending down savings to cover health insurance, claiming Social Security at 62 because the savings are running thin, locking in a permanent 30% reduction. Then, a decade later, potentially absorbing a 24% cut on top of that, 3 separate financial events: the forced exit, the early claim, the trust fund, cut each one individually manageable, but stacked on each other, they create something the retirement calculators never model because they assume you control the clock. This is where I want to give you the 3-level framework for understanding where people actually are at 60 in 2026. Not levels of achievement, levels of reality. Level 1 is about 29% of the population. They have nothing saved, 0 in retirement accounts. For most of them, Social Security is the plan, $2,081 per month if they waited. Less if they did not. The Clever Real Estate Survey found that for over half of this group, the reason was simple. They lived paycheck to paycheck before retiring, and 52% cited generally low income as the primary cause. This is not a financial planning failure. It is a structural income problem that financial planning cannot retroactively solve. Level 2 is the median, $185,000. This is where the math exercise gets genuinely illuminating. Take a couple, both 60, both about to retire, both with average Social Security benefits when they eventually claim at 67. 2 times $2,081 per month equals $4,162 per month in Social Security income. Apply the 4% rule to $185,000 in savings, and you get $7,400 per year, or $617 per month. Total monthly income, $4,779. Total annual income, $57,348. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says the average household headed by someone 65 or older spent $57,818 in 2022. The median couple is $470 per year from exactly breaking even. They are, in actuarial terms, one bad year from a structural deficit. 1 car, 1 medical incident, 1 roof. That is the margin. Level 3 is the top. Only 9.2% of households in the 55 to 64 range have more than $1 million in retirement assets. That is the group pulling the average from $185,000 up to $537,000. They are real. But they are not you, statistically speaking. And they are not the people making retirement decisions at the edge of the math. Here's what most people get wrong about the people at level 3. They mostly got there by being boring. Long contribution histories, low-cost index funds, employer matches they did not leave on the table, time in the market, not timing the market. In the period from 2022 to 2025, Fidelity found that savers who started with $100,000 and stayed invested in stocks, kept contributing, and rebalanced annually would have ended up with $191,463 by end of 2025. The person who got completely out of stocks and stopped contributing had $105,586. Same starting point, different behavior. $85,877 difference. In 3 years, that is the compounding gap people feel but rarely quantify. Now, let me bring Marcus back, because this is where his story resolves in a way that says more than any statistic. Marcus, unemployed at 59 with $310,000 saved, eventually found part-time consulting work at 62. He claimed Social Security at 62, locking in the 30% reduction. He spent 3 years buying health insurance on the marketplace, significantly less than the full price because his income was lower, but still real money. By 65, he had drawn down his $310,000 to roughly $215,000. He reached Medicare. He stabilized. He is not broke. But the plan he had at 58, retire at 65 with money to spare, became retire at 62 involuntarily, stabilize by 65, and spend the next 20 years carefully managing a number that was not designed for the life he ended up living. The second comedic aside, the data earns here. Someone retires voluntarily at 60 with $800,000 saved. Retirement planning working exactly as advertised. Someone else retires involuntarily at 61 with the same $800,000. Retirement planning scrambling to reboot. Same number, completely different movie. Let me build the mini case study that ties this together. Dave and Carol, both 60. Dave has been in logistics management for 31 years. Carol worked for 26 years as a school administrator and took 4 years off when their kids were young. Combined, they have saved $240,000 across their retirement accounts. Dave's projected Social Security at 67 is $1,900 per month. Carol's is $1,600, partly because of those 4 years out of the workforce and the lower salary in education. Combined, $3,500 a month, $42,000 a year in Social Security income. Their mortgage is paid off. They expect to spend $5,200 per month in retirement. 4% of $240,000 is $9,600 per year, $800 per month from savings. Add that to Social Security, $4,300 per month against $5,200, a gap of $900 per month. To close it, they either spend down principal faster than 4%, which risks running out in 15 years instead of 25, or they go back to work, reduce spending, or wait. Dave is 60. He is planning to work until 64 and contribute more. In March of this year, his company announced it was restructuring the middle management layer and moving operations to a regional hub 3 states away. Dave was offered a severance or a relocation. He took the severance. He is 60 and unemployed, and his retirement runway just went from 4 years of continued contribution to 0, while the healthcare clock started ticking the moment his employer coverage ended. That is not a story about bad luck. That is the 58%. That is the data in a face. Now let me give you the 3 things that are actually useful to take from all of this, calibrated specifically to the situation at 60 in 2026, not generic save more advice that you already know. First, know your actual number, not the average. The relevant benchmark is the median, $185,000 for the 55 to 64 cohort, according to the Federal Reserve. If you are above that, you are ahead of the majority of Americans at your age. If you are below it, you are not failing, you are in the majority. And knowing that tells you where to focus. The gap between where you are and where Fidelity's 8 times salary benchmark says you should be is the real number you are working with. Do the math on your actual salary, multiply by 8, subtract what you have. That is the problem statement. Everything else is commentary. Second, build a 62 to 65 buffer explicitly, not an emergency fund. A specific named buffer for the healthcare gap between potential involuntary retirement and Medicare eligibility. In 2026, a 62-year-old without employer coverage is looking at roughly $1,691 per month for a silver plan before subsidies. If you are in the 50% of people who will leave work earlier than planned, and statistically, you probably are, you need a line item in your retirement plan for 20 to 24 months of that cost, plus a realistic out-of-pocket budget. Most retirement calculators do not build this in. Build it in yourself. Third, model your Social Security decision before you claim it, not after. The difference between claiming at 62 and waiting until 70 is $12,000 to $15,000 per year permanently. For someone who lives to 85, that is $200,000 or more in additional lifetime income. The 8% per year delayed retirement credit from full retirement age to 70 is a guaranteed return on capital. You cannot buy in any market. If you have any flexibility, any asset at all to bridge the gap, the math on waiting is almost always compelling. Run the numbers, not the general version. Your version, with your projected benefit, your actual spending, your health situation. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And one more thing. Of the people who are actually on track for a comfortable retirement at 60, almost none of them got there by outsmarting the market. They got there by being in the market consistently in low-cost instruments for a long time. The complexity the industry sells you, the active management, the structured products, the alternatives is the product. The returns are the marketing. Over 30 years, a 1% annual advisory fee on $200,000 costs you nearly $300,000 in lost compounding. The people selling you the complexity are the ones who need you to stay confused. The script above is plain text, written as spoken word, no headers or formatting. Word count is approximately 3,800 words as written above. I need to expand to reach 5,000. Let me continue with additional depth below. Let me continue writing the script with more depth in each section. Actually, wait, let me now produce the complete final 5,000 plus word script as a single continuous piece of text. I'll combine all my research and planning into one flowing document now, $185,000. That is the median retirement savings for an American between 55 and 64 right now in 2026, according to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances. You are not going to see that number on a billboard. You are not going to see it in the Fidelity commercial with the green line going up and to the right, but it is the number that describes the financial position of the typical American standing at the edge of retirement. And here's the thing that makes it more unsettling than it looks at first. $185,000 at 4% annual withdrawal is $617 per month. That is the income your savings actually generate if you follow the rule everyone is supposed to follow. $617 a month on a 30-year savings career. But the number gets more complicated because the figure most people hear, the one that shows up in the headlines, the one the industry quotes, the one that makes retirement sound like a solved problem is not $185,000. It is $537,560. That is the mean, the average Federal Reserve data. Same report, same age group, same people. One number describes the middle of the distribution. The other number describes what happens when a handful of very wealthy households walk into the data set and pull everything upward. And for the last 3 decades, the retirement industry has been showing you the second number while most people are living the first one. This video is about the gap, not just the savings gap, the understanding gap. Because here is what I want to show you over the next 20 minutes or so. The real number is not just one number. It is 3 layers. And each layer reveals a different piece of why the retirement math so often falls apart for people who did everything approximately right. I am going to walk you through the actual data, the actual costs that the data misses, and the actual decision that most retirement plans assume you will make, but that 58% of Americans never get to make at all. The central metaphor I want you to hold on to through all of it is this. Bill Gates walks into a bar. The moment he sits down, every person in that bar becomes a billionaire on average. The bartender is now, on average, worth several $billions. The guy nursing his beer in the corner has not changed a thing. He is still nursing his beer. But the average of the room has been completely transformed by one person at one end of the distribution. That is American retirement savings statistics every time the word average appears. The mean is Gates. The median is the bar. I will tell you every time Gates walks in. Now here is what I want you to stay for. In a few minutes, I am going to show you a 3-year window in the retirement timeline that can cost a 62-year-old upward of $60,000 in a single category that most retirement calculators budget $0 for. But first, Let me show you exactly how distorted the starting picture is. There are two piles when you look at retirement savings in America. The first pile is what the industry shows you. The second pile is what describes most people. The industry shows you pile one because pile one is large, and large numbers generate confidence, and confident people pay management fees. The Federal Reserve's mean for Americans aged 55 to 64, $537,560. The Federal Reserve's median for the same group, $185,000. The difference between those two numbers, $352,000, is the statistical shadow of the households at the top of the distribution. That is Bill Gates walking in, and here is where pile one completely loses its usefulness as a guide. Fidelity, the largest administrator of 401k plans in the country, says that by age 60, you should have 8 times your annual salary saved for retirement. The median household income for Americans approaching 60 is somewhere in the range of $75,000. 8 times $75,000 is $600,000. The median American at the doorstep of retirement has $185,000. The shortfall between what the benchmark says you need and what the typical household actually has is $415,000. That is not a rounding error. That is a different life, a materially different life lived on materially different terms. Only 9.2% of households in the 55 to 64 age range have over $1 million in retirement assets. That is from the Congressional Research Service's analysis of the same Federal Reserve data. So when you read that the average American in their 60s has 1.2 million in retirement savings, as some platform data suggests, you are looking at a population that opted into a financial tracking app. Those are the people who already know where their money is. They are not the bar. They are the guy at the bar who has already ordered the good stuff and is thinking about whether to do a Roth conversion. 29% of current retirees have no money saved for retirement at all. 0. A quarter of non-retirees have 0 in any retirement account. Over half of all American households, 54%, according to the Federal Reserve report, having no dedicated retirement savings. More than half. So when you average retirement savings across the country, you are averaging in a massive number of zeros. The people at the top pull the mean up. The zeros pull the median down. And in the middle is the number that actually describes the experience of most 60-year-olds looking at a retirement timeline and trying to figure out if the math works. Let me introduce Marcus. He is 58 years old. He works in mid-level corporate management at a logistics company that has operated in his city for over 40 years. His salary is $78,000. He has $310,000 in retirement savings, well above the median, solidly in the upper half of his peer group. He has been telling himself since his early 50s that he will retire at 65. He has a detailed spreadsheet. He knows roughly what Social Security will pay him. He has modeled the 401k projections at 6% growth. The plan made sense at 50, at 55, right up until the moment it stopped making sense, which is a moment that arrives for most people with no warning and at no scheduled time. I am going to come back to Marcus, because what happened to him is what happens to 58% of Americans, according to the Transamerica Center for Retirement Studies. And it is not what he planned for. The actual median retirement age in America is 62, not 65, not 67, which is full retirement age for anyone born after 1960. 62, 3 years earlier than the plan. 3 years of contributions that did not happen. 3 years of compounding that did not compound. And when the 2026 Employee Benefit Research Institute survey asked people why they retired earlier than planned, 41% said a health problem or disability, up from 31% in 2025 alone. 35% said corporate changes, downsizing, reorganizations, business closures. Circumstances entirely outside the individual's control accounted for 76% of all unplanned early retirements. This is not a story about people choosing poorly. This is a story about the plan colliding with reality. The financial consequence of that collision is not just the missing contributions. It is what happens next. The missing contributions are the part people think about. The part they do not think about lives in the calendar. Between the age you stopped working and age 65 when Medicare begins, there is a gap, and that gap has a price tag. At age 60, a full price silver benchmark plan on the ACA marketplace costs approximately $1,598 per month, according to Value Penguin's 2026 analysis. By 62, that is $1,691. By 64, the last year before Medicare, $1,766 per month. Federal rules allow insurers to charge someone age 64 up to 3 times what they charge a 21-year-old. For the 3 years between 62 and 65, adding up those monthly premiums before deductibles, before copays, before the out-of-pocket maximum of $10,600 the ACA allows, gets you to $62,340 just in premiums. And the enhanced premium tax credits that held those costs down from 2021 through 2025 expired at the end of 2025. The subsidy cliff is back. Let me put that in terms that land on the retirement plan. The median person approaching retirement has $185,000 in savings. 3 years of health insurance premiums at the unsubsidized rate if they do not qualify for subsidies because their income or asset withdrawal pushes them above the threshold is $62,000. That is 33% of their entire savings. On one line item, before they pay for food, housing, or anything else retirement costs. A 2026 report from the Employee Benefit Research Institute put the total healthcare cost estimate for a retired couple at up to $469,000 across their full retirement. To have a 90% probability of covering healthcare spending, a man needs $212,000 saved. A woman needs $252,000. Those numbers are not the total retirement number. They are only the healthcare portion. For the person with a median $185,000 in total savings, that arithmetic does not work, not even approximately. By the way, hit subscribe if you like the content, otherwise YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. Here is where knowing the number matters. And here is where I want to tell you about something I built specifically around this problem. The numbers I've been walking through are the foundation of a digital book I put together called The Exit Code. It is 8 chapters of actual retirement research, drawn from 50 years of data, Federal Reserve surveys, EBRI studies, SSA actuarial tables, Vanguard and Fidelity participation data, synthesized into a mathematical framework that turns maybe someday into a specific date. I built it because this information exists. It is not hidden, but it is scattered across government reports and academic papers that nobody reads. And the financial industry has no incentive to synthesize it for you into a decision framework rather than a product pitch. 2 elements of the exit code connect directly to what I have been discussing. The first is what I call the 58% rule, the framework for building a buffer, specifically designed for the forced exit scenario. How much you need, in which accounts, structured in what way, to survive a 62 instead of a 65 retirement without permanently damaging the Social Security decision or spending down savings at the wrong time. The second is the chapter on the $14,000 invisible bill, the annual cost of the healthcare gap between early retirement and Medicare that most calculators treat as zero. I modeled it at different income levels, different states, different subsidy eligibility thresholds. The number for most people planning a gap retirement is not $60,000 over 3 years. When you add opportunity cost, the compounding return you lose on money spent on premiums instead of invested, the real cost is closer to $14,000 per year every year of the gap in permanently foregone compounding. Most plans account for nothing. The exit code has a chapter on it. You can get it through the link in the description for less than 1 dinner out. The urgency is mathematical, not marketing. Every year you delay building the actual framework costs you something the framework would have helped you avoid. Now let me take you to the Social Security layer, because this is where the most consequential and least reversible decision in the retirement plan lives, and it is a decision most people make under pressure rather than strategy. The average Social Security retirement benefit in April of 2026 according to the Social Security Administration's own monthly statistical snapshot, was $2,081.16 per month. The SSA applied a 2.8% cost of living adjustment for 2026, bringing the estimated average from 2015 to 2071 at the start of the year. That is approximately $24,972 per year. The SSA designed Social Security to replace about 40% of pre-retirement income. Most retirees spend between $50,000 and $60,000 per year. That means Social Security covers less than half the bill for the typical household. In the best case, here's the timing lever. You can claim Social Security as early as 62. Most people who retire involuntarily at the median age of 62 do claim at 62 because they have run out of other options. Claiming at 62 locks in a permanent 30% reduction compared to your full retirement age benefit for people born after 1960. That full retirement age is 67. Wait until 67 and you get 100% of your earned benefit. Wait until 70 and you receive an additional 8% per year in delayed retirement credits for each year past 67. That is 3 additional years, 24% more, compounded on top of the full retirement age benefit for the rest of your life. The difference between a 62 claim and a 70 claim for a person with average lifetime earnings can be $12,000 to $15,000 per year, every year, for life. A person who lives to 85 and strategically waited at 70 is looking at somewhere between $150,000 and $225,000 in additional lifetime Social Security income compared to the person who claimed at 62 because the healthcare costs were running out, the savings, and something had to give. Most people who are forced out at 62 are not making this calculation rationally. They are solving an acute problem income now with a tool that was designed to be a long-term lever, and the damage is permanent. There is no way to unclaim Social Security after 12 months. Then layer on top of this what is happening to the program itself. The Social Security Trust Fund for Retirement and Survivor Benefits is projected by the SSA's own chief actuary to run short in the fourth quarter of 2032, a timeline that was pushed forward by several months due to a 2025 federal policy change. If the trust fund depletes without congressional action, benefits for current recipients could be cut by 23 to 24% across the board. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget estimates that for a dual income couple retiring in 2033, that cut amounts to an $18,100 annual reduction in income. 3 in 4 Americans expect to rely on Social Security in retirement. 76% of pre-retirees are worried they will not receive the benefits they were promised. They are right to worry. The worry is mathematically grounded. Now let me give you the 3-level picture of where people actually are at 60 in 2026. These are not performance levels, they are descriptions. Level 1, roughly 29% of people, 0 in retirement savings. For this group, the entire retirement plan is Social Security, $2,081 per month if they waited. Less, potentially far less if they did not. Clever Real Estate's 2026 survey found that for most of this group, the cause was not a failure of discipline, but of income. 58% had lived paycheck to paycheck before retiring. 52% cited low income as the primary cause. 32% were 50 or older before they started saving anything at all, or never started at all. This is not a population that can be fixed with a YouTube video about index funds. This is a structural income problem. Level 2, the median, $185,000. Here is where the math exercise becomes genuinely instructive. Take a couple, both 60, both with average Social Security benefits when they claim at 67. 2 times 2,081 is $4,162 per month in Social Security. 4% of 185,000 is $7,400 a year, $617 per month from savings. Total monthly income, $4,779. Total annual, $57,348. The Bureau of Labor Statistics data for households headed by someone 65 or older shows average spending of $57,800 $818 annually, the median couple is $470 per year from breaking even, less than 1% of margin, one medical bill away from running a structural deficit, one car repair away from spending down principal faster than the 4% rule assumes. That is the median American retirement, built on perfect conditions that do not exist. Level 3, the top 9.2% with over 1 million saved. The people pulling the average from 185,000 to 537,000. These people are real. Their strategies work. But almost none of them got there by outsmarting anyone. They got there by contributing consistently to low-cost accounts for a long time and not touching it during the scary years. Fidelity's own data from 2022 to 2025 showed that a $100,000 401k balance left in stocks with continued contributions and annual rebalancing became $191,463 by end of 2025. The person who panicked left stocks and stopped contributing. $105,586. $85,000 difference. 3 years, same starting point, different behavior. Now, let me tell you how Marcus's story ends, because it closes this loop in a way the statistics alone cannot. Marcus was laid off at 59. He found part-time consulting work within 8 months, but at roughly half his previous salary. He burned through a meaningful portion of his savings, covering health insurance. His income level meant he qualified for partial subsidies, which helped, but not enough to make the premiums negligible. He claimed Social Security at 62, locking in the 30% reduction, because the gap between what he was earning part-time and what he needed to cover expenses was real. By 65, when Medicare kicked in, he had drawn his $310,000 down to approximately $220,000. He was not destitute. But the retirement he planned at 58, exit at 65, with money to spare, Social Security at 70 for maximum benefit became exit involuntarily at 59, stabilize by 65, and manage a tighter budget for the rest of his life with a permanently reduced Social Security check. Marcus did not make bad decisions. Marcus ran into the 58%. He was just not prepared for it. The second comedic cutaway the data has earned by now. Financial advisor, your plan looks solid. You are on track. Also, that plan assumes you work until exactly 65, claim Social Security at exactly 67, and somehow never get sick or laid off in between. Incredible plan. Truly bulletproof.